start with Mr. DeFord. Welcome. For your first committee hearing, I assume.
Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. I'm used to having a rock and roll band behind me when I have a microphone in front of me. During the time that I've been given to share my testimony here, I think it's important to note before I start that in these 5 minutes I'll be speaking that somebody in the United States will die of a drug overdose, and it is almost a 72% chance that during those 5 minutes it will be fentanyl related. Having started that way, Chairman Brown, Ranking Member Scott, and esteemed committee members, thank you for having me. I know this is a bit of a curveball, but I like a little baseball myself. My name is Jason DeFord, but to most I am known as Jelly Roll. It is important to establish earlier that I am a musician and that I have no political alliance. I am neither Democrat nor Republican. In fact, because of my past, my right to vote has been restricted. Thus far, I have never paid attention to a political race in my life. Ironically, I think that makes me the perfect person to speak about this because fentanyl transcends partisanship and ideology, gentlemen and women. This is a totally different problem. And I was speaking outside to the media, and I gave them a statistic that said 190 people a day overdose and die every single day in the United States of America. That is about a 737 plane. That's what about a 737 aircraft can carry. Could you imagine the national media attention it would get if they were reporting that a plane was crashing every single day and killing 190 people? But because it's 190 drug addicts, we don't feel that way. Because America has been known to bully and shame drug addicts instead of dealing and trying to understand what the actual root of the problem is with that. But the sad news is that that narrative is changing too, because the statistics say that in all likelihood, almost every person in this room has lost a friend, family member, or colleague to the disease known as addiction. I've attended more funerals than I care to share with y'all. This committee, I could sit here and cry for days about the caskets I've carried of people I loved dearly, deeply, in my soul, good people, not just drug addicts, uncles, friends, cousins, normal people. Some people that just got in a car wreck and started taking a pain pill to manage it. One thing led to the other. And how fast it spirals out of control, I don't think people truly understand. So many people. Equally, I think it's important for me to tell y'all that I'm not here to defend the use of illegal drugs. And I also understand the paradox of my history as a drug dealer standing in front of this committee. But equally, I think that's what makes me perfect to talk about this. I was a part of the problem. I am here now standing as a man that wants to be a part of the solution. I brought my community down. I hurt people. I was the uneducated man in the kitchen playing chemist with drugs I knew absolutely nothing about, just like these drug dealers are doing right now when they're mixing every drug on the market with fentanyl, and they're killing the people we love. I'll be honest with y'all, my desire is to only get older and only do better and be better. I believed when I sold drugs genuinely that selling drugs was a victimless crime. I truly believe that, y'all. My father always told me what doesn't get you in the wash will get you in the rinse. Now I have a 15-year-old daughter whose mother is a drug addict. Every day I get to look in the eyes of a victim in my household of the effects of drugs. Every single day. And every single day I have to wonder if me and my wife, if today will be the day that I have to tell my daughter that her mother became a part of the national statistics. History repeats itself, gentlemen. Even in the 1990s, crack cocaine had long made its way into my middle lower class neighborhood. And at that moment, even as a teenager, you could have never convinced me in that moment that there would be a far bigger problem on the horizon in the form of a pharmaceutical drug. And then I watched opioids and Oxycontin burst onto the scene. I'm here to tell y'all that fentanyl is going to make the Sackler family look like saints. And I want to let y'all sit with that for a second. It is time for us to be proactive and not reactive. We were reactive with crack, we were reactive with opioids, and y'all are taking the first step at somebody in Senate finally being proactive. I truly believe in my heart that this bill that this bill will stop the supply and can help stop the supply of fentanyl. But in part of being proactive, gentlemen and women and ladies, I have to be frank and tell y'all that if we don't talk to the other side of Capitol Hill and stop the demand, we are going to spin our tires in the mud. Y'all are taking the first step, but I encourage you to take it outside of this room and you take it to your colleagues and your constituents and you give them the most that you can. I know I've got a few seconds here, and Senator Brown said I may or may not go over. All I want to say is that I not only encourage y'all to do this, I encourage y'all to take it a step further. At every concert I perform, I witness the heartbreaking impact of fentanyl. I see fans grappling with this tragedy in the form of music that they seek solace in music and hope that their experiences won't befall others. They crave reassurance. These are the people I'm here to speak for, y'all. These people crave reassurance that their elected officials actually care more about human life than they do about ideology and partisanship. I stand here as a regular member of society. I am a stupid songwriter, y'all, but I have firsthand witnessed this in a way most people have not. I encourage y'all to not only pass this bill, but I encourage you to bring it up where it matters, at the kitchen table. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeFord.
I'd like to start with you, Mr. DeFord. First, I'd like to congratulate you on being named CMA's New Artist of the Year. That's quite an award, and it's great to see another Tennessean here at the Capitol, so welcome to you. I'd like to stay on our state for a minute.
Yes, sir.
Our state is facing a grave threat from drug overdoses. In fact, we have the #2 mortality rate in the nation in Tennessee. Yes, and according to the Tennessee Department of Health, the majority of these overdoses are linked to illicit fentanyl. I was very touched by your opening remarks, and in particular, your comments about addressing the demand for fentanyl as well as the supply. We're here talking about a bill that addresses the supply, but I would love to get your perspective on how we might address the demand. I know you've thought a great deal about this.
Yeah, it's first of all, it's incredible to meet you, Mr. Haggerty, Senator Haggerty. Being a Tennessean, I am very, very respectful of all that you've done for our state. Not only do we have the second biggest mortality rate, Nashville actually was the second most dangerous, deadly metropolis in America for fentanyl, behind Baltimore. I had a meeting with our mayor about it recently, and just to the actual demand of it, I think there's not a proper education about it. I don't think there's enough resources for people to learn about it. There's not enough affordable rehabilitation centers in the state of Tennessee. These are all things I'd love to talk about. I think we're scheduled to hang out with each other soon anyways, and I would love to discuss with you. But I live in a very juxtaposition here where I understand the drug dealer and the addict because I have played the position of both. And unrelated, but to Mr. Kennedy's point, I agree with you, Senator Kennedy. I believe that chart is about as ass backwards as it could be, excuse my language. But Mr. Haggerty, I thank you for asking. And I only said that I see this bill as truly helping stop the supply. But as always, the problem with Capitol Hill is that's a bunch of y'all in here fighting to fix half the problem, and we do have a whole problem here, Senator Haggerty.
Well, I look forward to continuing our discussion about that when we meet together later today.
Thank you.
Again,
thank you. I'm excited.
Most of us up here can't sing all that well, but what we can do is legislate. What kind of signal would it send to the people you talk to who struggle to feel heard and seen if we come together in both houses, as we have in the Senate, 23-0 here, and then the Senate floor? If we can do that in the House, what kind of signal will it be sent to the people whom you're fighting for?
It's immeasurable. It's immeasurable because from the outside looking in, we don't see nothing happening in D.C. except fights. All we see is war and all we see is division. And it makes us feel unheard and unseen, and it makes us feel like our problems will always get caught in the middle of some kind of a partisan issue. And you and Senator Scott coming together in this committee has taken the first step that I think could be the beginning of the change that is needed in America, not just D.C., because this isn't the only bipartisan bill that needs to be spoke about. It's the mountain in front of us. But there are many mountains behind that one that must be spoke about too. And I applaud y'all for taking the first step, because me being here, I know for sure that some of my people are watching this right now, and for the first time ever, we feel heard. The voiceless feel like they have a voice in Washington, D.C. today, and I carry that with pride as I stand here with y'all.
Maybe a little bit lighter note, because I want to acknowledge Mr. DeFord and personally thank him. I know you were in Bristol, Virginia recently for a concert, and that you actually went next door to Abingdon and saw the softball team and kind of cheered them on. I'm grateful for that. And I know you recently as well were closer to Richmond and visited a prison in Chesterfield.
Yes, sir.
I'd love you, if you could share briefly with some of the experiences you felt, particularly with some of that prison community in Chesterfield.
The HEART program, sir, is what it's called, and that sheriff down there has really got his hand on what he's doing. There's another sheriff in Flint doing great things that are similar. He is focused on rehabbing drug addicts in jail. It's actually the only jail in the United States of America that will allow you to come in without a crime. If you are just a drug addict that wants to get off the streets and no rehab will take you and you are indigent, they will allow you to come into that jail and join the HEART program to get sober. And I think that's incredible. But, sir, I do that as often as I can, and rehabs all across America. And the saddest part is you just see the same thing. You just see heartbreak and despair. But yes, sir, that was incredible. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because that guy in Chesterfield really has his, that sheriff really has his hand on the pulse of what's happening in America.
Well, thank you for being willing to share your story.
Respectfully, not for a pat on the back, but we also donated our proceeds from the show that night to them. We cut the Chesterfield County Jail, the HEART program, I think a $30,000 check.
Well,
So
kudos to you. Thank you. And also for maybe less prevalent, but visiting the softball team in Edmonton.
I was cheering for him, man. I paid for him to go to the championship. I'm always going to be a cheering for him.
Well, grateful.
We've heard many stats today. Over 379 million doses of fentanyl were seized across America in 2022, enough to kill every single American or every single Alabamian 75 times over. There were more than 100,000 overdoses, 112,000 to be exact, in 2023, and fentanyl is now the leading cause of death between the ages of 18 and 45. I think it's critically important that we think about this crisis beyond simple statistics, though. These numbers represent real people. They represent pain. They represent tragedy. They represent loss. They all have faces and stories that are touching every corner of our society. There are families that tonight, when they sit down for dinner in Alabama or wherever they may be across the nation, there is going to be a chair where someone should be sitting, where they're not, because of fentanyl poisoning and because of the effects of this drug. And we saw this last year when a 2-year-old, a beautiful little 2-year-old, was found dead in Alabama with fentanyl in her system. And as I've traveled our state and our nation, I routinely hear these stories of heartbreak and tragedy that just are gut-wrenching. And when I was at the border last year, I went to San Diego, and a DEA officer was sitting there talking to us, and they told us the story of a mom who had 2 boys. She had 2. And they broke apart and shared a Percocet, and you'll know this story. And it was laced with fentanyl, and both of those boys died. As a parent, no one should ever go through that. No parent should have to deal with that heartbreak. And so as a mama, I am ready for us to do something now, not tomorrow, today. I think we owe it to the kids across this great nation.
Add to your sentiment that of the 109,000 people that died in America last year are people. They are humans. Every one of those signified a funeral, a eulogy, a mother, a father, sons, children, cousins, uncles, people just like the people in this room. I think it was really important for you to say that, and thank you for that.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of our witnesses for being here. I'd like to say to Mr. DeFord, Jelly Roll, I heard your sermon on the CMA, and I was wondering what you're doing on Sunday. You know well from your experience that the war on drugs began in 1971, ushering in federal and state policies that resulted in an explosion of drug-related arrests. Your family's been impacted by this. You've been impacted from 1975 to 2019. The United States prison population ballooned from under 250,000 people to more than 1.4 million. So I'd like to ask you, as you've told the story of your past, when you were a teenager, you were arrested and served time in prison for drug-related offenses, including violent ones. How has that felony conviction on your record affected you a successful rapper, a musician, a songwriter to date?
Yeah, I mean, I carry it in every way you can carry it, Senator. Thanks for asking. I am, there's so many countries I'm not allowed into, which I never thought would matter until I start having hit records in Canada and Germany, and I'm not allowed to go. I'm not allowed to vote. Any core right has been restricted for me. I struggled to buy a home because homeowner insurances were trying to charge me premiums because of my felony. I mean, this thing has hit me in ways that we couldn't describe. I've had neighborhoods where HOAs just flat wouldn't let me live there because of my felony. I have seen the effects of carrying this thing with me. And my state has a violent offender policy where it does zero forgiveness for violent offenses. A crime I committed when I was 15, I'll never be able to get expunged. And I carry that still today.
So you in a real sense are the embodiment of a story of redemption.
Yes, sir.
Know a little bit about redemption, preach about it every week, and you embody that, and yet you live with this cloud over your head, unable to vote and struggling to buy a home.
It's hard to move forward when your past is always in your back pocket.
Do you believe that access to better care, treatment, and resources early on could have kept you out of trouble with the law?
Absolutely. And I want to be very clear that I believe drug addiction is a mental health problem, not a law enforcement problem, just so we're clear on the front end of that. I believe drug dealing is a law enforcement problem. I believe drug addiction is a mental health problem, sir. But I believe if I would have had resources in my juvenile years or more opportunities, or if we focused more on education and loving and less on discipline, especially with our youth, we could get mountains moved.
Well, thank you for your voice on this and ways in which you're using your music and your platform to help people who are dealing with addiction issues. But we need you to help us to get it right. Again, thank you so much,
sir,
for your voice on such.
I'm not educated enough to speak on this, sir, but I will say I have a feeling there's going to be more than enough money to go around.
Candidly, gentlemen, there's not much that Congress can do to make President Xi stop his country from producing the precursor chemicals. I've met with President Xi personally in Beijing. I don't think it did much good. And candidly, there's not much the United States Congress can do to make President Lopez Obrador in Mexico stop the cartels. He knows what's going on. There are two things that we can do. First, we, meaning Congress, we can secure the border. It's an open, bleeding wound. And it is wide open. And it is wide open by design. I've seen it. Most of the members of this committee have. That's not what I want to talk about. The other thing that Congress can do is crack down on the dealers, not the addicts, Mr. DeFord, the dealers. Now, Mr. Urben, see this pencil?
Yes, sir.
This pencil tip, the amount of fentanyl just in a pencil tip as represented by a pencil tip will kill you dead. Dead as fried chicken, Mr. DeFord. I hope that's Southern enough for you. You see this? 40 grams?
Yes, sir.
This will kill every man, woman, and child in Culpeper, Virginia. Not far from here. If you have this much fentanyl, you're a dealer. This is 400 grams. This will kill every man, woman, and child in Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, you're a dealer. You're not holding this much fentanyl. You're not dealing. Now, 40 grams. This will get you, if you get caught, a minimum of 5 years. Okay? 400 grams, if you get caught with this much, enough to kill every man, woman, and child in Knoxville, and many more before you step on it, this will get you 10 years minimum. There's just one problem. We punish other drugs less severely than we do the most powerful drug, fentanyl. I mean, just look at it. 40 grams, 5 years. 400 grams for fentanyl, 10 years. Methamphetamines, 5 grams will get you 5 years. 50 grams will get you 10 years. Much less severely than fentanyl. We do the same thing for PCP. We do the same thing for crack cocaine. What you allow, gentlemen, is what will continue. Now, I support the Fentanyl Eradication Act that we've talked about today, but I also support something else. I support another bill, the Fairness in Fentanyl Sentencing Act. And it would lower the 5-year mandatory minimum threshold from 40 grams of fentanyl to 2 grams. And it would lower the 10-year mandatory minimum for 400 grams to 20 grams. And we ought to pass it too. What you allow is what will continue. I'm going to yield back, Chairman Brown, my 14 seconds to make up for my past transgressions.
I want to first of all thank the chairman and ranking member for their leadership, not only in having this hearing, but also in the bill, the Fend Off Fentanyl Act. It is long past time that this bill get passed. I think that ranking member Scott said it right. The shenanigans in the House need to stop, and we need to get some stuff done. Why they would stop this makes no sense to me. We need to categorize fentanyl as a national emergency that it is. We do need to hold China accountable for its role in this crisis.
What happens to law enforcement morale when prosecutors either refuse to prosecute or they minimize penalties that are sought for drug crimes, including fentanyl crimes?
Well, I think there's a bigger picture here, and that is that the majority of violent crime in every community is committed by a small percentage of people, and certainly the drug trade.
That's certainly what the sheriff and the chief of police of Memphis told me too. They know exactly who they are.
So when we're able to apply pressure and take people off the street who prey on the people within our communities, we have an impact on the quality of life in the community. When we're unable to do so, then we see the problems that we see in a lot of cities across this country. It is a challenge for law enforcement to put our efforts into trying to make our community safe, only to see a revolving door of the criminal justice system. It's something we've been speaking of for quite some time. At some point, we need to recognize that what we're doing is not working. You apply enough pressure, it eliminates some of this criminal activity, and the quality of life goes up.
Mr. Urben, is it accurate to say that the vast majority of fentanyl trafficking comes into the country through official ports of entry?
Most of the fentanyl comes through official ports. It usually comes across the Mexican border, most of the fentanyl coming into the country.
But through official ports of entry?
Most of it, a majority of it probably does, yes, sir.
Yeah. Mr. Urben, from your experience, what has China done to crack down on Chinese pharmaceutical companies that manufacture fentanyl and fentanyl precursors?
There's been limited, action within China from my perspective since I've left government in terms of doing that. During my time in government, I did not have insight within China in terms of what they were actually doing. We had certainly an office within the embassy there for DEA, and it had limited cooperation with Chinese law enforcement. We're trying to build that relationship at the time.
How about Mexico? What have they done to crack down on the drug cartels that mix fentanyl with other drugs and smuggle them into the United States?
So I think they, in a very difficult situation concerning the cartel's power and reach and ability to corrupt Mexican government components. They've done, to some degree, what they can under the circumstances, but it's been very limited in terms of their ability to counter or negate the ability of the Mexican cartels to traffic fentanyl here.
We know that fentanyl, the precursor chemicals, and many of the traffickers themselves are bringing this poison into our country via the southern border. So it's the crisis at the border and the failed policies at the border that are the chief contributor to the deaths of more than 73,000 Americans in 2022. How well do federal law enforcement agencies, whether it's CBP or ICE, communicate and cooperate with state and local law enforcement when it comes to cases in which seized fentanyl has been traced back to cartels?
So in a general sense, they cooperate well, but in terms of the threat and what we now face, they need to cooperate better. There needs to be more communication. There needs to be the advantage of taking advantage of the data that I talked about earlier. So the individual that was stopped with 9,000 pills, that should be immediately downloaded, taken back to a larger data tank to determine who else that individual was connected with within the network. So whether it's at the border, we can leverage that for interdiction in a moment's notice, or the other individuals that he is connected to within, again, the Mexican cartel network with speed.
Yeah. Now, I'll just add to that the working relationship between DEA and Homeland Security on this issue, the task force, play a pivotal role in our investigation. And we do have a good, strong working relationship and sharing information. Unfortunately, the demand is outpacing what the bandwidth is.
Yeah.
Compared to when I targeted them with undercover money laundering activities, with undercovers and wiretaps, right now the opportunity exists to intake that data, right? So whether we have large data tanks that we talked about, whether it's FBI, DEA, HSI, and the individual enforcement that happens out on the street, whether it's a car stop or the arrests, we want to pull that data in, and it'll do two things. One, it maps out the network because, like I talked about earlier, they are connected through transportation, communication, and financial movements of money. Two, with speed, because if you had this platform set up within the federal law enforcement agencies here, you could kick out target packages to the field where they would be enabled to go effect arrests or enforcement.
In California, fentanyl has been the cause of 77% of drug deaths amongst teenagers last year. And, we have all talked about the statistics and how they show that overdoses involving fentanyl were behind 1 in 5 deaths of people aged 15 to 24. 1 in 5 deaths behind in those 15 to 24, I think, robbing our state and our country. Robbing our state and our country of our future.
To share one devastating story from my home state of Maryland. A young lady, Trinity Ripley, lost her life to accidental fentanyl overdose after consuming a counterfeit pill just before Christmas last year. Trinity was only 18 years old, the daughter of Christine and Vaughn Ripley, who's a council member in the town of Brunswick in Frederick County in Western Maryland. Trinity died the first time she took an illicit pill of any kind. People like Trinity without an opioid tolerance face even greater risks of succumbing to a fentanyl overdose. Her father had spoken to her about these safety issues and the challenge with peer pressure. In his advocacy on these issues, Mr. Ripley has said, quote, "The thing that drives me nuts is that one pill can kill."